The house stood on the edge of a small Vermont town, its wooden walls weathered by years but still holding warmth inside. Richard lived there with his 3 daughters, Molly, Grace, and Claire. The loss of his wife years ago had left the home quieter than it used to be, but life continued, shaped by the bond between father and daughters. Emily, the eldest, had grown into the role of caretaker without ever being asked. She cooked, organized, and carried responsibility on her shoulders. She was admired by her sisters for her strength, though she often longed for someone to take care of her in return. Grace, the middle sister, lived in a world of imagination. She kept a small notebook close to her at all times, filling its pages with poems and thoughts about love. Claire, the youngest, was full of restless energy. She dreamed of adventures beyond their town, eager to break free of rules and expectations. Despite their differences, the sisters were united by their father's presence. Richard was a man who rarely revealed much of what he felt. He worked hard, kept his word, and loved his daughters in his own quiet way. He wasn't cold, but he wasn't expressive either. To the sisters, his silence was both comforting and frustrating. They longed to hear more from him, to know his heart beyond the duties of fatherhood. One autumn evening, as the wind shook the trees and scattered golden leaves across the yard, the family gathered in the living room. The fireplace glowed, its warmth softening the shadows. Emily sat by the window with her knitting. Grace leaned on the arm of a chair with her notebook resting in her lap, and Claire paced restlessly, looking out the window as though expecting something to appear. Richard broke the silence. His voice was steady, but softer than usual. "Your mother would have been proud of you girls," he said. His words caught their attention immediately, because he rarely spoke of their mother. Emily's knitting needles froze in her hands. Grace's eyes filled with tears, though she tried to blink them away. Claire stopped pacing and turned toward him, her expression serious. Richard leaned back in his chair, staring into the flames. "There's something I've never told you," he said. His tone carried weight, the kind that made the sisters exchange uneasy glances. "I've kept it for many years, but it feels wrong to hide it any longer." Emily's breath caught. "What do you mean, Father?" Grace clutched her notebook tighter, as though her heart needed something to hold on to. Claire crossed her arms, impatient but curious, her eyes fixed on him. Richard hesitated, his silence stretching until the crackling fire was the only sound in the room. Finally, he spoke. "Before I met your mother, I made choices that shaped the man I became. And those choices left behind a part of my life I never shared with you." The room grew heavy. The sisters had always imagined their father's story began and ended with their mother. A love simple and complete. Now they realized there was more, something hidden, something that might change the way they saw him. Emily felt a mix of fear and longing. She wanted the truth, even if it hurt. Grace's mind raced, already painting pictures of what this secret might be. Claire, bold as ever, stepped closer. "So what are you trying to tell us?" Richard looked at each of them in turn, his eyes tired but full of something they couldn't name. "I'll tell you," he said at last. "But understand, it may not be easy to hear." The sisters leaned in, their hearts pounding. For the first time, their father wasn't just a figure of strength and duty. He was a man with a story, and tonight, he was finally ready to share it. The fire burned low, shadows stretching long across the living room, as Richard finally began his story. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the weight he carried. "Before I met your mother, there was another woman," he said. The words hung in the air, sharp enough to still every breath. Emily leaned forward, gripping the edge of her chair. Grace pressed her notebook against her chest, her heart racing with questions she didn't dare ask. Claire, always restless, moved closer, her eyes fixed on her father with curiosity and disbelief. Richard's gaze dropped to the floor. "Her name was Margaret. We met when I was young, before I settled here, before I thought about family. She was different, bright, full of life, the kind of woman who could light up a room. I thought I would spend forever with her." The sisters stared at him, stunned. Their father had never spoken of anyone before their mother. To hear this now felt like discovering a part of him they never knew existed. Richard continued, his tone quiet but steady. We were serious. We dreamed of marriage, of building a life together. But life is not as simple as dreams. Her family moved away suddenly. We lost touch, and in those years apart, I met your mother. She changed everything. She became my heart, my anchor, my home. I married her, and I never regretted it. Emily's throat tightened. Then why tell us this now? She asked softly. Richard exhaled, the firelight reflecting in his weary eyes. Because Margaret reached out to me years later, after I was already married. She sent me a letter. Grace gasped, clutching her notebook tighter, as though the words themselves might slip from the air and vanish if she let go. Claire's brows drew together in sharp lines. You mean you've been hiding this all these years? Richard nodded slowly. Yes. I kept the letter locked away. She wrote that she still cared for me, that she wondered what could have been if life hadn't pulled us apart. I never answered her. I couldn't betray your mother. But the letter stayed with me. I didn't have the heart to throw it away. The room grew heavier with silence. The sisters didn't know whether to feel betrayed or to admire the honesty of the man who had just opened his heart. Emily's voice was careful, measured, but trembling. Do you still think about her? Richard closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with quiet honesty. Sometimes. Not because I loved your mother any less. I loved her with everything I had. But love doesn't erase what came before. Margaret was a part of my story, and I never spoke of it. That was my mistake. Grace's eyes glistened with tears. All this time, you carried that in silence. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Richard's answer came slowly. Because I didn't want you to see me differently. I was afraid you'd think I had been unfaithful in my heart. But the truth is, people are not made of one love. We carry many, some that live, some that fade, some that stay only as memories. Claire, always the bold one, asked what her sisters were too afraid to. Is she still alive? Richard hesitated, his hands folding together tightly. Yes, she lives in Boston now. At least, that's where the letter came from. I don't know more than that. I never looked. The fire crackled, filling the pause that followed. The three sisters exchanged glances, each of them feeling a different weight. Emily thought of duty and sacrifice, wondering if she too was living too carefully, burying her own desires. Grace thought of unfinished poems, of words left unsaid, of the beauty and pain of holding on to something lost. Claire, restless, thought of choices, of freedom, of what it meant to follow the heart without fear. Emily finally broke the silence. Father, this doesn't make us see you less. It makes us see you more. You weren't just our parent. You were a man who loved, who lost, who carried burdens. Grace nodded, her tears falling quietly. It makes you real. And it makes me realize how fragile love is. But Claire, with fire in her voice, asked, so what happens now? Do you want to see her again? The question pierced the air. Richard froze, his face tightening, as though he hadn't allowed himself to even imagine the possibility. He stared into the fire, his silence louder than words. The sisters held their breath. For the first time, they weren't just daughters listening to their father. They were women standing at the edge of his truth, realizing that his story wasn't finished and maybe theirs wasn't either. The fire burned low. But the tension between them only grew brighter. The night had revealed a secret, but it had also opened a door none of them knew existed. And none of them knew what would come through it. The days after Richard's confession were heavy with unspoken thoughts. The sisters tried to go on as usual, Emily managing the house, Grace writing in her notebook, Claire finding excuses to escape outside, but the secret hung in the air like a storm that refused to break. None of them could forget the image of their father sitting by the fire. Admitting to a love before their mother, Emily felt it first. She noticed her father's tired eyes each morning and wondered if he regretted sharing the truth. She carried responsibility on her shoulders, but now she carried his secret too, and it pressed against her heart. She thought about her own life, how she had put aside dreams of love to care for her family. She had been so careful, so cautious, always doing the right thing. But late at night, when the house was quiet, She asked herself if she had missed her chance at happiness the way her father might have. Grace, sensitive and dreamy, filled her notebook with words that came faster than she could write them. She wrote about lost letters, unfinished love, and the way people carry memories like hidden treasures. She imagined her father as a young man standing between two choices, and she felt closer to him than ever. Yet it also stirred something inside her, an ache for love she had not yet found. A longing to experience the kind of passion her father described. Claire, the youngest, reacted differently. She was restless, angry even. She couldn't stand the thought of living in silence, of hiding feelings the way her father had. Why should anyone bury what they feel? She muttered one evening as she stared out the window. Love should be lived, not locked away. Her boldness clashed with her sister's quiet grief. But deep down, she was just as shaken. One cold evening, Emily found her father alone in the kitchen. He sat at the wooden table, a cup of tea untouched before him. His shoulders bent under a weight she had never seen so clearly. She sat across from him, her voice soft but steady. "Do you regret telling us?" Richard lifted his gaze, weary but honest. "No, I regret waiting so long. I regret not trusting you sooner. But telling you, it has freed me in a way. Still, I worry. I don't want you to see me as weak." Emily's throat tightened. "I don't see weakness, Father. I see a man who loved deeply twice. That doesn't make you less. It makes you more human." Her voice wavered, but her words were true. For years she had seen him only as their protector. But now she saw the man behind the role. Grace entered, then quietly holding her notebook. She set it on the table between them, a page open. "I wrote something," she said. Richard glanced at the page, his lips trembling as he read her words about carrying two loves in one heart. About how memories are not betrayals, but reminders of who we once were. He looked up at her, his eyes wet. "You understand me better than I understand myself," he whispered. Claire appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed but her eyes full of fire. "Enough with poems and regrets," she said firmly. "What are you going to do, Father? You still haven't answered the real question. Do you want to see her?" The room went still. Richard looked at his daughter's Millie's steady gaze, Grace's tearful hope. Claire's fierce challenge, and he finally admitted what he had not dared to say. "Yes," he whispered. "Part of me wants to." The sisters exchanged glances, each processing the words differently. Emily's heart ached with fear, what it might mean if he sought Margaret again. Grace felt a strange excitement, as though life itself had cracked open to reveal new possibilities. Claire, bold as ever, felt relief. "Then you should," she said quickly. "You can't spend the rest of your life wondering." Emily frowned. "It's not that simple. What about us? What about Mother's memory?" Claire shot back. "Mother is gone. He loved her. That doesn't vanish because he remembers someone else." Grace, caught between them, whispered, "Maybe love isn't about choosing one or the other. Maybe it's about accepting that both exist." Richard listened, his heart torn. For years, he had hidden the letter away, convincing himself that silence was safer. But now his daughter's voices echoed what he had tried to ignore. His story wasn't finished. That night, after his daughters went to bed, Richard went to his study. He opened the drawer where the letter had rested for years. Its paper yellowed, the ink faded. He read it again, his chest tightening with every word. Margaret's voice, captured on the page, still carried warmth, still carried longing. She had written of what might have been, of the love they once shared, of the hope that he still remembered her. He folded the letter carefully, but this time he didn't put it back. He kept it in his hand, staring out the window at the snow beginning to fall. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to see her again, to look into her eyes, to speak the words left unsaid. The next morning, the sisters noticed the change in him. He seemed quieter, but not in the heavy way of before. There was something alive in his expression, as if he had opened a door inside himself. Emily worried this door might lead him away from them. Grace felt inspired, writing even faster, her words alive with hope. Claire felt satisfied, as if the truth was finally beginning to breathe. But the question hung between them still, unspoken yet sharp. If their father reached for the past, what would it mean for their future? The days moved quickly, but every glance, every silence carried the weight of desire, his, theirs, and the life they all shared. The sisters began to realize that their father's choice was not only about him. It would change all of them. And deep down, each of them wondered what love they might be hiding, what truths they had not yet spoken. The letter was no longer just their father's secret. It had become a mirror, forcing each of them to face their own hearts. Winter settled hard on Vermont, a town wrapped in snow and silence. Inside the old house, the sisters felt the change in their father. Richard no longer seemed like the man weighed down by secrets. He walked slower, but with purpose, his eyes distant as if he was looking toward something unseen. The letter never left his desk now. Sometimes, late at night, Emily saw him sitting with it in his hands, staring at the paper as though it could answer all the questions he carried. The tension in the house grew with the cold. Emily felt torn between wanting to protect him and fearing that if he went to Margaret, he might lose himself or worse, lose the family they had built. Grace lived in a swirl of emotion, writing poems about love that endured, love that waited, and love that returned after years apart. Claire grew restless, eager for her father to act instead of lingering in hesitation. One evening, as snow fell thick outside, a new letter arrived. Richard stood at the door with the envelope in his hand, his breath fogging the air. The return address read Boston. His heart raced as he opened it. Margaret had written again. Her words were simple but powerful. She was still alive, still waiting, and she wanted to see him just once, to speak, to close the circle of their unfinished story when he read it. The sisters were gathered in the living room. His voice broke slightly as he shared her words. The room went still. Emily's face paled. Grace covered her mouth with her hand, and Claire leaned forward, her eyes wide with anticipation. "What will you do?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. Richard's hands shook as he folded the letter. "I don't know. If I go, it might change everything. If I stay, I may always wonder what could have been." Grace whispered through her tears, "You deserve happiness, Father. Love doesn't erase the past. It carries it." Emily looked down, fighting with her emotions. "But what about us? What about Mother? Going to hurt feels like betraying her memory." Claire, bold as ever, stepped in quickly. "It's not betrayal. He gave Mother everything while she was alive. Now he's alone and she's gone. Why shouldn't he have one last chance to follow his heart?" The sisters argued, their voices filling the room. Emily feared losing the family they had left. Grace wanted to believe love could heal anything, and Claire refused to let fear stop him. Through it all, Richard listened, his heart aching at the sight of his daughters divided because of him. Finally, he spoke. "Enough. This is my choice to make. But I needed to hear your hearts first. You've shown me what love means in different ways. Beauty, courage. I see myself in each of you." That night, Richard didn't sleep. He walked through the halls of the house, touching the walls, remembering laughter, remembering his wife, remembering the years that had shaped them all. He stood at her old rocking chair and whispered, "I loved you. I still do. But I can't silence this other part of me any longer." His voice cracked. But his resolve grew. By morning, his decision was made. At breakfast, he looked at his daughters with calm determination. "I will go to Boston," he said. "Not to replace what I had with your mother, but to honor the truth of who I am. If Margaret is still waiting, I need to see her. Not for forever, just for closure. I need to know." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She reached for his hand. "Then go. Just promise us you'll come back. We've already lost one parent. We can't lose you too." Grace smiled softly through her tears. "And when you come back, tell us everything. Don't keep it locked away again." Claire grinned with relief, her bold spirit shining. "Go live, Father. Don't let life pass by with regrets." Richard nodded, overcome with emotion. For the first time in years, he felt not only like a father, but like a man free to choose. Asterisk.